What if I told you that the biggest lie ever told to you about success, happiness, and fulfillment is that focusing on yourself is selfish? What if everything you've been taught about putting others first, sacrificing your own needs, and constantly giving until you have nothing left is actually the exact reason why you're stuck, exhausted, and living a life that doesn't even feel like your own? Right now, at this very moment, you are being programmed to believe that self-focus is narcissistic, that prioritizing your own growth is somehow wrong, and that the only way to be a good person is to constantly put everyone else's needs before your own. But here's the brutal truth they don't want you to know. This mentality is destroying your life, your potential, and ironically, your ability to actually help anyone else. You cannot give what you do not have. You cannot lead others to a place you've never been. You cannot inspire confidence if you don't possess it yourself. You cannot create abundance for others if you're living in scarcity. And you cannot love others fully if you haven't learned to value yourself first. This audiobook will shatter every limiting belief you have about self-focus and show you why the most successful, fulfilled, and genuinely helpful people in the world are obsessively focused on themselves first. Not because they're selfish, but because they understand a fundamental principle that average people completely miss. When you become the best version of yourself, everyone around you benefits. When you master yourself, you automatically elevate everyone in your orbit. When you focus on yourself with intention and purpose, you don't become less valuable to others. You become infinitely more valuable. By the time you finish this audiobook, you will understand why self-focus is not only necessary, but mandatory for anyone who wants to live an extraordinary life. You will have a complete framework for prioritizing yourself without guilt, for building unshakable confidence from the inside out, and for creating a life so magnetic that opportunities, relationships, and success are naturally drawn to you. This is not about becoming selfish or self-centered. This is about becoming self-aware, self-directed, and self-empowered, so that you can show up as the most powerful version of yourself in every area of your life. Chapter 1. The Selflessness Trap and Why It's Destroying Your Life. Here's a question that's going to make you uncomfortable. How much of your life do you actually control? How many of your daily decisions are made based on what you truly want versus what you think others expect from you? How much of your time, energy, and attention goes toward building the life you actually desire versus constantly managing other people's needs, emotions, and problems? If you're honest with yourself, the answer is probably terrifying. Most people are living their entire lives on autopilot, constantly reacting to external demands, putting everyone else first, and wondering why they feel empty, resentful, and stuck in a life that doesn't feel authentic to who they really are. This is the selflessness trap, and it's one of the most dangerous psychological patterns you can fall into because it disguises itself as virtue while slowly destroying everything that makes you uniquely powerful. The selflessness trap works like this. From childhood, you're taught that good people sacrifice for others, that putting yourself first is selfish, and that your worth is determined by how much you can give to everyone else. So you develop a pattern of constantly saying yes when you want to say no, of prioritizing other people's goals over your own, of making yourself smaller so others feel more comfortable, and of believing that your value comes from how useful you are to everyone else. But here's what nobody tells you about this pattern. it doesn't actually make you a better person. It makes you a weaker person. It doesn't make you more valuable to others. It makes you less valuable to everyone, including yourself. When you constantly put others first, you're not being noble. You're being unconscious. You're operating from a scarcity mindset that says there isn't enough success, happiness, or fulfillment to go around. So you have to sacrifice your share to make others happy. But this is a fundamental misunderstanding of how value creation actually works. Value is not finite. Success is not a zero-sum game. When you focus on becoming the most powerful, capable, and fulfilled version of yourself, you don't take anything away from anyone else. You expand the total amount of value available to everyone around you. Think about the people in your life who inspire you the most. Are they the ones who are constantly sacrificing themselves for others and living in quiet desperation? Or are they the ones who have mastered themselves, who are living with purpose and intention, who have created something meaningful with their lives? The answer is obvious. You're not inspired by victims. You're inspired by victors. You're not motivated by people who have given up on their dreams to make everyone else comfortable. You're motivated by people who have pursued their dreams relentlessly and created something extraordinary in the process. The selflessness trap also creates a twisted dynamic where you become addicted to being needed. You start to derive your sense of worth from how much other people depend on you, how much they need your help, and how much you can sacrifice for their benefit. But this isn't love or service. This is codependency. You're not helping others become stronger and more capable. You're enabling their weakness and creating a dynamic where they need you to stay small so they can feel secure. This pattern destroys authentic relationships because it's based on inequality rather than mutual respect and growth. Here's another brutal truth about the selflessness trap. When you don't prioritize your own development, growth, and well-being, you have nothing of real value to offer anyone else. You might think you're being helpful by constantly giving your time and attention to others, but what you're actually giving them is the energy of someone who doesn't value themselves enough to invest in their own potential. You're modeling for them that self-neglect is normal, that dreams are meant to be sacrificed, and that the highest aspiration in life is to make yourself useful to other people rather than to become the fullest expression of who you're capable of being. The most dangerous part of the selflessness trap is that it prevents you from ever discovering what you're truly capable of. When all your time and energy goes toward managing other people's lives, you never have the space to explore your own potential, to develop your unique gifts, to pursue your deepest interests, or to create something meaningful that could benefit far more people than your constant availability ever could. You become a slave to other people's immediate needs, instead of a creator of long-term value. Breaking free from the selflessness trap requires a fundamental shift in how you think about service, value, and responsibility. True service is not about making yourself constantly available to solve other people's problems. True service is about becoming so skilled, so capable, and so fulfilled that your very presence elevates everyone around you. It's about modeling what's possible when someone commits fully to their own development and growth. It's about creating value from a place of abundance rather than giving from a place of depletion. The most generous thing you can do for the people you care about is to become the most powerful version of yourself. When you focus on developing your skills, expanding your consciousness, building your confidence, and creating a life you're genuinely excited about, You give everyone around you permission to do the same. You stop enabling their limitations and start inspiring their potential. You stop being a crutch that keeps them weak and start being an example that shows them what strength looks like. Chapter 2. The energy economics that governs everything in your life. Most people have no idea how energy actually works. And this ignorance is costing them everything. They think energy is infinite, that they can give endlessly without consequence, that saying yes to everyone and everything is somehow sustainable, and that their well-being will somehow magically take care of itself while they focus on everyone else's needs. This is not just naive, it's destructive. Energy is the most valuable currency you possess, and how you manage it will determine the quality of every single area of your life. Energy economics is simple. You have a finite amount of mental, emotional, and physical energy available to you each day. Every thought you think, every emotion you process, every decision you make, every interaction you have, every task you complete, depletes this energy bank account. And just like with money, if you spend more than you have, if you constantly operate in energy deficit, you will eventually bankrupt yourself mentally, emotionally, and physically. The difference is that unlike money, energy directly impacts your ability to think clearly, make good decisions, maintain healthy relationships, and create anything meaningful with your life. Here's what happens when you ignore energy economics. You start each day already depleted because you haven't properly restored yourself from the previous day. You say yes to requests that drain you because you haven't learned to evaluate opportunities based on their energy return on investment. You engage with people who consistently take more than they give because you haven't recognized that relationships, like investments, need to be profitable for both parties to be sustainable. You pursue activities and commitments that exhaust you because you've never learned to distinguish between effort that energizes you and effort that depletes you. The result is a life of chronic exhaustion, resentment, and mediocrity. You're constantly running on empty, which means you never have the energy available to pursue anything that could actually fulfill you or create meaningful value in the world. You become reactive instead of creative, responsive instead of proactive, and you settle for managing problems instead of building solutions. Your relationships suffer because you're always giving from a place of depletion rather than abundance. Your work suffers because you don't have the mental clarity or creative energy to perform at your highest level. Your health suffers because you don't have the energy to maintain the habits and practices that keep you strong and vibrant. But here's what changes everything. When you understand energy economics and start managing your energy like the precious resource it is, your entire life transforms. You stop being a victim of circumstance and start becoming the architect of your experience. You learn to invest your energy strategically in activities, relationships, and pursuits that multiply your energy rather than drain it. You develop the ability to say no to energy-depleting opportunities so you can say yes to energy-generating possibilities. Energy management starts with energy awareness. Most people have no idea what actually gives them energy versus what takes it away because they've never paid attention to how different activities, people, and environments affect their internal state. They operate on autopilot, saying yes to everything and wondering why they always feel exhausted. But when you start tracking your energy levels throughout the day, when you start noticing which activities leave you feeling more alive and which ones leave you feeling drained, you begin to see patterns that can completely change how you structure your life. High-energy activities are usually aligned with your natural strengths, interests, and values. They're activities that challenge you in a way that feels engaging rather than overwhelming, that allow you to use your unique skills and talents, and that contribute to something you genuinely care about. These activities don't feel like work, even though they might require significant effort. They energize you because they're expressions of who you really are, rather than obligations you've accepted to please other people. Low-energy activities are usually misaligned with your natural wiring. They're activities that drain you because they require you to work against your natural strengths, suppress your authentic personality, or contribute to outcomes you don't actually value. These activities feel like work even when they're technically easy because they require you to be someone you're not in order to complete them successfully. The same principle applies to relationships. High-energy relationships are those where both people are committed to mutual growth, where there's genuine respect and appreciation, where both parties contribute value to each other's lives, and where you feel more like yourself when you're with them rather than less. These relationships energize you because they're based on authenticity, reciprocity, and shared growth. Low-energy relationships are those where you constantly have to manage someone else's emotions, where you're giving significantly more than you're receiving, where you have to suppress parts of yourself to maintain the relationship, or where the other person consistently drains your emotional resources without contributing to your well-being. These relationships exhaust you because they require you to operate from depletion rather than abundance. Once you understand the difference between energy-generating and energy-depleting activities and relationships, you can start making strategic decisions about how to structure your life. This doesn't mean avoiding all challenging or difficult situations. It means choosing your challenges strategically based on whether they're likely to expand your capacity and contribute to your growth, or whether they're likely to diminish your resources and limit your potential. The highest performing people in any field understand energy economics intuitively. They protect their energy like their life depends on it, because they understand that their energy is their life. They're selective about what they commit to, ruthless about eliminating energy drains, and strategic about investing their energy in activities and relationships that compound over time. They understand that focusing on themselves first isn't selfish. It's essential for maintaining the energy required to create value in the world. When you master energy economics, you stop living in survival mode and start living in creation mode. You have the mental clarity to think strategically about your life. Instead of just reacting to whatever happens to you, you have the emotional resources to build meaningful relationships instead of just managing other people's problems. You have the physical vitality to pursue challenging goals instead of just trying to make it through each day. You become a source of energy for others instead of a drain on their resources. Chapter 3. The magnetic effect of authentic self-development. There's a phenomenon that happens when you truly commit to developing yourself that most people never experience because they never actually prioritize their own growth. It's called the magnetic effect. And it's the reason why some people seem to effortlessly attract opportunities, relationships, and success, while others struggle endlessly despite working just as hard. The magnetic effect is what happens when you become so genuinely aligned with your authentic self, so skilled at what you do, and so clear about your values and direction that you naturally draw everything you need toward you without having to chase, convince, or manipulate. Most people have this completely backward. They think that in order to get what they want, they have to go out and pursue it aggressively. They think they have to convince people to like them, persuade others to give them opportunities, and constantly prove their worth to the world around them. So they spend their lives chasing external validation, trying to be what they think others want them to be, and exhausting themselves in the pursuit of things that often turn out to be unfulfilling even when they achieve them. But the magnetic effect works in the opposite direction. When you focus intensely on becoming the most skilled, confident, and authentic version of yourself, when you develop genuine expertise in areas you care about, when you build unshakable self-respect and inner security, you create a gravitational pull that draws the right opportunities, relationships, and experiences toward you naturally. You stop being someone who needs external validation and start being someone who provides value, inspiration, and leadership to everyone around you. Here's why the magnetic effect is so powerful. Most people are lost. They don't know what they want. They're not clear about their values. They haven't developed their unique gifts, and they're constantly looking outside themselves for direction, purpose, and fulfillment. When they encounter someone who has done the inner work to become genuinely self-directed, self-confident, and self-aware, they're naturally drawn to that person's energy because it represents something they desperately want but don't know how to create for themselves. The magnetic effect is not about being perfect or having everything figured out. It's about being authentic, committed to growth, and clear about your direction. People are magnetically attracted to authenticity because it's so rare in a world where everyone is trying to be what they think others want them to be. When you're genuinely yourself, when you're not trying to impress anyone or hide your imperfections, when you're simply committed to being the best version of who you actually are, you give everyone around you permission to do the same. This creates deep connection and trust, because people feel safe to be themselves around you. The magnetic effect also works because self-developed people solve problems instead of creating them. When you've invested in developing your emotional intelligence, your communication skills, your technical abilities, and your self-awareness, you become someone who adds value to every situation you enter. You're not constantly creating drama, requiring emotional management, or needing others to solve your problems. Instead, you're someone who can be counted on to contribute solutions, insights, and positive energy. This makes you invaluable in both personal and professional relationships. But here's what's crucial to understand. The magnetic effect only works when your self-development is genuine rather than strategic. If you're developing yourself primarily to impress others or to get something from the external world, people will sense the inauthenticity and the manipulation. True magnetism comes from developing yourself because you're genuinely committed to becoming the fullest expression of your potential, not because you want to attract specific outcomes. This is why so many self-help approaches fail. People read about techniques and strategies for attracting success or relationships, but they approach these techniques from a place of neediness and manipulation rather than genuine growth. They're trying to use self-development as a tool to get external validation rather than as a path to internal fulfillment. This creates a desperate energy that repels the very things they're trying to attract. Authentic self-development that creates the magnetic effect involves several key components. First, you have to develop genuine self-respect by consistently following through on commitments to yourself. This means doing what you say you're going to do, even when no one is watching, even when it's difficult, and even when you don't feel like it. Self-respect cannot be faked or borrowed. It has to be earned through consistent action aligned with your values and goals. Second, you have to develop real competence. in areas that matter to you. This means identifying your natural strengths and interests, and then systematically building expertise through deliberate practice, continuous learning, and consistent application. Competence creates confidence, and confidence is magnetic because it's rare. Most people are insecure about their abilities because they've never committed to developing them systematically. Third, you have to develop emotional mastery, which means learning to manage your internal state regardless of external circumstances. This includes the ability to remain calm under pressure, to process emotions without being overwhelmed by them, to communicate clearly even in difficult situations, and to maintain a positive outlook even when facing challenges. Emotional mastery is magnetic because most people are slaves to their emotions and are constantly looking for others to help them feel better. Fourth, you have to develop clarity about your values, purpose, and direction. This means spending time in self-reflection, identifying what genuinely matters to you as opposed to what you think should matter to you, and making decisions based on this internal compass rather than external expectations. Clarity is magnetic because most people are confused about what they want and are constantly seeking guidance from others. When you combine self-respect, competence, emotional mastery, and clarity, you create a presence that naturally attracts the right opportunities and relationships. You become someone that others want to be around, work with, and support, because being in your presence elevates their own experience. You stop chasing external validation because you've developed internal validation. You stop trying to convince others of your worth because your worth becomes self-evident through your actions and presence. The magnetic effect also creates a positive feedback loop. The more you focus on authentic self-development, the more you attract people and opportunities that support your continued growth. The better the quality of relationships and experiences you attract, the more resources you have available for further self-development. This creates an upward spiral that compounds over time, leading to levels of fulfillment and success that are impossible to achieve through external pursuit alone. Chapter 4. The Mastery Mindset that separates legends from everyone else. There's a fundamental difference between people who achieve extraordinary things and everyone else, and it's not talent, luck, or connections. It's their relationship with mastery. While most people approach life as consumers, always looking for what they can get, legends approach life as creators, always focused on what they can become. They understand that mastery is not just about developing skills in a particular area. It's about developing a way of thinking and being that enables continuous growth, resilience, and excellence in everything they do. The mastery mindset is built on a simple but profound principle. You are either growing or you are dying. There is no neutral ground. Every day, you are either becoming more skilled, more aware, more capable, and more aligned with your potential, or you are stagnating and slowly declining. Most people choose stagnation because growth requires effort, discomfort, and the willingness to face their limitations. But legends choose growth because they understand that the pain of growth is temporary, while the pain of regret is permanent. Here's what separates the mastery mindset from the average mindset. Average people want to be good enough. They want to reach a level of competence where they can be comfortable, secure, and avoid criticism. They see learning and development as something you do until you reach an acceptable level, and then you stop because you've arrived. The mastery mindset sees learning and development as a lifelong process that never ends. People with a mastery mindset are not trying to reach a destination where they can finally relax. They're committed to a journey of continuous evolution because they understand that their growth is their greatest contribution to the world. The mastery mindset also reframes failure completely. Average people see failure as evidence that they're not good enough and use it as justification to give up or lower their standards. People with a mastery mindset see failure as data. They understand that failure is not the opposite of success. It's part of the process of success. Every failure provides information about what doesn't work, which gets them closer to discovering what does work. They fail faster and more frequently than average people because they're willing to take risks and push boundaries that others avoid. This difference in how failure is processed creates completely different life experiences. Average people live in fear of making mistakes, so they play it safe, avoid challenges, and never discover what they're truly capable of. People with a mastery mindset embrace challenges specifically because they know that's where growth happens. They understand that comfort is the enemy of greatness, and that the only way to expand your capabilities is to consistently operate at the edge of your current abilities. The mastery mindset is also characterized by what psychologists call intrinsic motivation. Average people are motivated by external rewards: money, recognition, approval, status, security. While these things are nice to have, they're not sustainable sources of motivation because they depend on factors outside your control. People with a mastery mindset are motivated by the inherent satisfaction of becoming better, of solving complex problems, of creating something meaningful, and of expressing their unique capabilities. This internal motivation is infinitely more powerful than external motivation because it cannot be taken away by changing circumstances. Here's why intrinsic motivation is so crucial for long-term success. External rewards provide temporary satisfaction, but they don't create lasting fulfillment. You might feel good for a moment when you receive recognition or achieve a goal, but that feeling fades quickly, and you need another hit of external validation to feel good again. This creates an addiction to external approval that makes you dependent on other people's opinions and reactions for your sense of worth and satisfaction. But when you're motivated by mastery itself, by the process of growth and development, you create a sustainable source of fulfillment that doesn't depend on external circumstances. You enjoy the daily practice of getting better. You find satisfaction in small improvements and incremental progress. You don't need to wait for major achievements or external recognition to feel successful because you measure success by your commitment to the process rather than by specific outcomes. The mastery mindset also changes your relationship with competition. Average people see other people's success as a threat to their own possibilities. They think that if someone else wins, it means they lose. People with a mastery mindset see other people's success as inspiration and information. They study successful people not to compete with them, but to learn from them. They understand that there's no limit to how many people can achieve mastery, and that other people's excellence expands the possibilities for everyone. This shift from competition to collaboration creates completely different relationships and opportunities. When you're focused on your own mastery rather than on beating others, you naturally attract other people who are committed to growth and excellence. You build relationships based on mutual respect and shared values, rather than comparison and insecurity. You become someone that high performers want to work with and learn from because you're focused on creating value rather than claiming credit. The mastery mindset also requires what Carol Dweck calls a growth mindset, as opposed to a fixed mindset. A fixed mindset believes that abilities, intelligence, and talents are static traits that cannot be significantly developed. This leads to avoiding challenges, giving up easily when faced with obstacles, and feeling threatened by other people's success. A growth mindset believes that abilities can be developed through dedication, hard work, and learning from failure. This leads to embracing challenges, persisting through obstacles, and finding inspiration in other people's success. But the mastery mindset goes beyond even the growth mindset. It's not just about believing you can improve. It's about being obsessed with improvement. It's about making growth and development the central organizing principle of your life. It's about consistently asking yourself, how can I get better today? What can I learn from this experience? How can I approach this more effectively? What would mastery look like in this situation? People with a mastery mindset also understand the compound effect of small, consistent improvements. They don't need to make massive changes overnight. They focus on getting slightly better every day, understanding that small improvements compound over time into extraordinary results. They're patient with the process, but urgent about daily action. They measure their progress in terms of years and decades rather than days and weeks. The mastery mindset ultimately creates a completely different quality of life. Instead of being driven by fear, insecurity, and external validation, you're driven by curiosity, growth, and the intrinsic satisfaction of developing your potential. Instead of comparing yourself to others, you compare yourself to who you were yesterday. Instead of avoiding challenges, you seek them out because you know that's where transformation happens. Instead of being threatened by other people's success, you're inspired by it because it shows you what's possible. When you adopt the mastery mindset, focusing on yourself stops being selfish and starts being strategic. You understand that your commitment to your own development is the greatest gift you can give to the world, because the more skilled, aware, and capable you become, the more value you can create for everyone around you. You stop apologizing for prioritizing your growth and start recognizing it as a responsibility you have to yourself and to everyone whose life you have the potential to impact. Chapter 5. The boundary system that protects your energy and potential. One of the most crucial skills you can develop in your journey of focusing on yourself is the ability to set and maintain clear boundaries. But most people completely misunderstand what boundaries actually are and why they're essential. They think boundaries are about being mean, selfish, or antisocial. They think boundaries will damage their relationships and make them less likable. This is exactly backward. Boundaries are actually what make authentic, healthy relationships possible. They're what allow you to give from a place of abundance rather than obligation, and they're what protect your energy and potential from being drained by people and situations that don't deserve access to your most valuable resources. A boundary is simply a clear limit that defines what you will and won't accept in your life. It's a way of communicating your standards, values, and priorities to the world around you. It's a protective barrier that ensures your time, energy, and attention go toward the things that genuinely matter to you, rather than being scattered across every random request, demand, or expectation that comes your way. Without clear boundaries, You become a victim of other people's agendas, constantly reacting to external pressures instead of proactively creating the life you actually want. Here's why boundaries are so crucial for anyone who wants to focus on themselves and develop their potential. Your time, energy, and attention are finite resources. Every moment you spend on something that doesn't align with your values, goals, or authentic interests is a moment you can't spend on developing yourself, pursuing your dreams, or creating value in areas that genuinely matter to you. Without boundaries, your life becomes a chaotic mess of other people's priorities, and you never develop the focused intensity required to achieve mastery in anything. The reason most people struggle with boundaries is that they've been conditioned to believe their worth comes from how much they can do for other people. They think that saying no makes them selfish, that disappointing others is the worst thing they can do, and that their value is determined by how available and accommodating they are. This is a toxic mindset that leads to resentment, exhaustion, and a life that feels completely out of control. But here's the truth about boundaries. They don't hurt relationships. They improve them. When you have clear boundaries, people know exactly what to expect from you. They know what you're available for and what you're not. They know how to interact with you in a way that respects your time and energy. This creates much healthier dynamics because it eliminates the confusion, manipulation, and resentment that come from unclear expectations. Boundaries also make your yes more valuable. When you say yes to everything, your yes becomes meaningless because it's not based on choice, it's based on compulsion. But when you have clear boundaries and you choose to say yes to something, that yes carries real weight because the person knows you could have said no, but chose not to. They know they're getting your time and attention because you genuinely want to give it to them, not because you feel obligated. The boundary system has several key components that work together to protect your energy and potential. First, you need clear, personal standards. These are non-negotiable principles about how you expect to be treated, what kinds of behavior you will and won't tolerate, and what conditions need to be met for you to invest your time and energy in something. Personal standards are not about controlling other people. They're about controlling your own responses and decisions. For example, you might have a standard that you don't engage in conversations where you're being criticized, blamed, or manipulated. You don't try to stop other people from having these conversations, but you remove yourself from them because they don't meet your standards for productive interaction. You might have a standard that you only commit to projects or relationships where there's mutual respect, clear communication, and shared commitment to positive outcomes. Second, you need clear priorities. Most people say yes to things, not because they want to do them, but because they haven't taken the time to figure out what they actually want to focus on. When you have clear priorities, decision-making becomes much easier because you can quickly evaluate whether something aligns with your stated priorities or not. If it doesn't align, you say no, regardless of how interesting, urgent, or socially expected the request might be. Your priorities should be based on your values, goals, and authentic interests, not on what other people think you should prioritize. This requires spending time in self-reflection to identify what genuinely matters to you, as opposed to what you think should matter to you. Most people never do this work, so they end up living other people's lives instead of their own. Third, you need clear communication skills. Having boundaries is useless if you can't communicate them effectively. This means learning to say no clearly and directly without over-explaining, apologizing, or justifying your decision. It means learning to redirect conversations that don't meet your standards. It means learning to express your needs, expectations, and limits in a way that's firm but respectful. Most people struggle with boundary communication because they're afraid of conflict or disappointing others. But conflict is not necessarily negative. Conflict is simply what happens when two different sets of needs or expectations meet. Healthy conflict can lead to better understanding, clearer communication, and stronger relationships. The goal is not to avoid conflict, but to navigate it skillfully. Fourth, you need consistent enforcement. Boundaries that aren't enforced aren't boundaries. They're suggestions. If you set a limit and then don't follow through when someone crosses it, you're teaching them that your boundaries don't actually matter. This trains people to disrespect your limits and creates a pattern where you constantly feel violated and resentful. Enforcement doesn't mean being harsh or punitive. It simply means following through on the consequences you've communicated. If someone consistently violates your boundaries, you reduce their access to your time and energy. If someone doesn't respect your standards, you don't invest in a relationship with them. If someone doesn't align with your priorities, you don't say yes to their requests. The boundary system also requires you to take responsibility for your own choices. It's not other people's job to respect your boundaries if you haven't clearly communicated them. It's not other people's job to manage your time and energy for you. It's not other people's fault if you say yes to things you don't want to do. You are responsible for setting clear limits, communicating them effectively, and enforcing them consistently. When you implement a strong boundary system, several things happen that dramatically improve your life. First, you stop feeling like a victim of circumstances and start feeling empowered to create the experiences you want. Second, you attract higher quality relationships because you're no longer available to people who don't respect your standards. Third, you have much more time and energy available for the things that genuinely matter to you because you're not constantly scattered across random obligations. Fourth, you develop much stronger self-respect because you're consistently honoring your own needs and values instead of sacrificing them for other people's comfort. The boundary system is not about being antisocial or selfish. It's about being strategic with your most valuable resources so you can create the maximum positive impact in the areas that align with your authentic self and meaningful goals. When you protect your energy and potential through clear boundaries, you become much more valuable to the people who deserve access to your time and attention because you're giving from a place of choice and abundance rather than obligation and depletion. Chapter 6. The vision clarity that transforms everything. Most people are living their lives completely backwards, and they don't even realize it. They're making decisions based on what other people expect, what society tells them they should want, what their family thinks is appropriate, or what seems safe and acceptable. They're constantly reacting to external circumstances instead of creating from an internal vision. They're spending their precious time and energy on activities that don't align with anything they actually care about because they've never taken the time to figure out what they genuinely want their life to look like. This is why most people feel lost, frustrated, and empty, even when they're technically successful by conventional standards. Vision clarity is the foundation of everything else we've discussed. Without a clear vision of who you want to become and what you want to create with your life, you have no framework for making decisions about where to invest your energy, what boundaries to set, or what opportunities to pursue. You become a leaf blowing in the wind, constantly changing direction based on whatever external pressure is strongest at the moment. But when you have genuine vision clarity, everything changes. Every decision becomes easier because you have a clear criterion for evaluation. Every boundary becomes obvious because you know what supports your vision and what detracts from it. Here's what most people get wrong about vision. They think it's about setting goals or making plans. But goals and plans are just the tactical level. Vision is about identity. It's about becoming crystal clear on who you are at your core, what you value most deeply, what kind of impact you want to have in the world, and what would make you feel genuinely fulfilled and proud of how you spent your time on Earth. This is not about what you think you should want or what would impress other people. This is about what resonates with your authentic self when you strip away all the external conditioning and social programming. The reason vision clarity is so transformative is that it gives you an internal compass that can guide you through any situation or decision. When you know who you're becoming and what you're building, you don't need external validation to know whether you're on the right track. You don't need other people to tell you what's important or worthwhile. You don't need to constantly compare yourself to others because you're measuring your progress against your own vision rather than against other people's achievements. Vision clarity also creates what psychologists call cognitive consistency. When your actions align with your deepest values and authentic desires, you experience internal harmony and peace. When your actions contradict your vision, you experience internal conflict and dissatisfaction. This internal feedback system becomes incredibly reliable guidance for making decisions that support your long-term fulfillment rather than just your short-term comfort or convenience. But here's the challenge. Developing genuine vision clarity requires you to be brutally honest with yourself about what you actually want versus what you think you should want. Most people have been so conditioned by external expectations that they don't even know what their authentic desires are anymore. They've spent so much time trying to meet other people's standards that they've lost touch with their own internal guidance system. This is why the process of developing vision clarity often involves what feels like unlearning. You have to question every assumption you have about what success looks like, what happiness means, what you're supposed to prioritize, and what kind of life is worth living. You have to separate your authentic voice from all the other voices that have been shaping your thinking since childhood. This can be uncomfortable because it often reveals that you've been pursuing things that don't actually matter to you, or that you've been neglecting areas of life that are actually crucial to your fulfillment. The vision clarity process starts with what I call values archaeology. Most people think they know what they value, but when you dig deeper, you often discover that what you say you value and what you actually prioritize with your time and energy are completely different things. Values archaeology involves looking at how you actually spend your time, what you actually get excited about, what you actually feel proud of, and what you actually regret not pursuing. Your authentic values are revealed by your actions and emotions, not by your intellectual beliefs about what you should value. Once you've identified your authentic values, the next step is future self-visualization. This involves spending time imagining yourself 5, 10, or 20 years from now, having fully embodied your values and developed your potential. What does that version of yourself look like? How do they think, act, and respond to challenges? What have they created or contributed? What kind of relationships do they have? What does their daily life look like? The more vivid and detailed you can make this vision, the more it can guide your current decisions and actions. But vision clarity is not just about the future. It's also about purpose identification, which means understanding what kind of contribution or impact you want to make during your time alive. This is not necessarily about having a grand mission to change the world, though it could be. It's about understanding what feels meaningful and worthwhile to you personally. It could be raising children who become confident and capable adults. It could be creating art that moves people. It could be building a business that solves important problems. It could be developing expertise in a field that fascinates you. The key is that it feels authentic and significant to you, regardless of how it looks to anyone else. When you combine authentic values, future self-vision, and purpose identification, you create what I call a personal constitution. This is a clear, written description of who you are, what you stand for, what you're building, and how you want to show up in the world. This constitution becomes your decision-making framework. When opportunities arise, you can quickly evaluate whether they align with your constitution or not. When challenges occur, you can respond from your constitution rather than from fear or reactivity. The most successful people in any field have incredible clarity about their vision and values. They don't waste time on opportunities that don't align with their core mission. They don't get distracted by what other people are doing or what's trendy or popular. They have such a clear sense of direction that they can make decisions quickly and confidently, even in uncertain situations. This clarity gives them a massive advantage because while other people are hesitating, comparing options, and seeking external validation, they're taking focused action toward their clearly defined vision. Chapter 7. The toxic influence elimination that clears your path. Here's a truth that will make you uncomfortable. Some of the people in your life right now are actively sabotaging your growth, and you're letting them do it because you're afraid of being alone or because you think you owe them your loyalty. You're surrounding yourself with people who drain your energy, discourage your ambitions, criticize your efforts to improve, and keep you stuck at their level because your growth threatens their comfort zone. This is not about being mean or judgmental toward others. This is about recognizing that your environment has a massive impact on your development and that you have a responsibility to yourself to create conditions that support your highest potential. The people you spend the most time with become your reference group. They shape your standards, influence your beliefs, affect your mood and energy, and either inspire you to grow or pressure you to stay small. If you're constantly surrounded by people who complain about their lives but never take action to improve them, you'll start to see that as normal. If you're constantly around people who mock ambition, criticize success, and discourage taking risks, you'll internalize those attitudes and limit your own possibilities. If you're constantly around people who are negative, gossipy, or drama-focused, you'll find it much harder to maintain the positive, focused mindset required for significant achievement. This is not about judging other people or thinking you're better than them. Everyone is at different stages of their development, and everyone has their own path to walk. But you have to be honest about whether the people in your life are supporting your growth or hindering it. You have to be strategic about who gets access to your time, energy, and attention, because these are your most valuable resources and they directly impact your ability to become who you're capable of being. Toxic influences come in many forms, and they're often disguised as care, concern, or loyalty. The chronically negative friend, who constantly complains but never wants solutions. The family member who criticizes every goal you set because they're afraid of being left behind. The colleague who gossips about everyone and tries to drag you into drama and politics. The romantic partner who feels threatened by your success and subtly undermines your confidence. The social group that bonds over cynicism, complaint, and making fun of people who try to improve themselves. These influences are particularly dangerous because they often come from people you care about, and they're usually not intentionally malicious. They're just operating from their own fears, insecurities, and limited thinking. But the impact on your development is the same whether it's intentional or not. Every minute you spend in environments that reinforce limitation, negativity, or mediocrity is a minute you're not spending in environments that challenge you to grow, think bigger, and pursue your potential. The elimination process starts with honest assessment. Look at the people you spend the most time with and ask yourself, after spending time with this person, do I feel more energized or more drained? Do I feel more optimistic about my possibilities or more discouraged? Do I feel inspired to take action or more inclined to complain and make excuses? Do I feel more confident in my abilities or more insecure and self-doubting? Do our conversations focus on possibilities and solutions or problems and limitations? This assessment will often reveal uncomfortable truths about relationships you've been maintaining out of habit, obligation, or fear, rather than because they're actually beneficial to your development. You might discover that certain friendships are based more on shared complaining than shared growth. You might realize that some family relationships are more about managing other people's insecurities than mutual support and respect. You might recognize that some social environments consistently bring out the worst in you, rather than the best. Once you've identified toxic influences, the elimination process requires courage and clear boundaries. This doesn't necessarily mean completely cutting people out of your life, though sometimes that's necessary. It often means reducing the amount of time and energy you invest in relationships that don't support your growth. Changing the nature of your interactions with people who consistently drain you, and refusing to participate in conversations or activities that reinforce limitation and negativity. For example, you might decide that you're no longer available for complaining sessions that don't include any interest in solutions. You might choose to limit contact with family members who consistently criticize your goals and dreams. You might stop participating in social gatherings that revolve around gossip, criticism, or cynicism. You might end romantic relationships where your partner feels threatened by your growth instead of excited about it. This process is often difficult because it challenges the social conditioning that tells you to prioritize other people's comfort over your own development. You might feel guilty about setting boundaries with people who have been in your life for a long time. You might worry about being seen as selfish or arrogant. You might be afraid of being alone or of not having anyone to spend time with if you eliminate toxic influences. But here's what happens when you create space. By eliminating toxic influences, you make room for positive influences to enter your life. You start attracting people who are also committed to growth, who inspire you to be better, who support your ambitions, and who challenge you in productive ways. You discover communities and environments where your desire for improvement is celebrated rather than criticized. You find mentors, collaborators, and friends who elevate your thinking and encourage your potential. The people who belong in your life are those who inspire you to be better, who support your authentic goals, who celebrate your successes without resentment, who offer constructive feedback when you need it, and who challenge you to grow in positive ways. These are people who have their own ambitions and are working on their own development. So they understand the importance of focus, discipline, and continuous improvement. They don't try to keep you small because your growth doesn't threaten them. It inspires them. Chapter 8. The unshakable confidence that comes from within. Confidence is the most misunderstood concept in personal development. And this misunderstanding is keeping most people trapped in cycles of insecurity and external validation seeking. Most people think confidence is a feeling that you either have or don't have, something that comes from external achievements or other people's approval, or a personality trait that some people are born with and others aren't. This is completely wrong. Real confidence is not a feeling. It's not dependent on external circumstances, and it's not a fixed trait. True confidence is a skill that you build through consistent action, and once you understand how to build it properly, it becomes unshakable regardless of what happens around you. The confidence that most people seek is actually just ego validation. They want to feel good about themselves based on how they compare to others, how much approval they receive, how many achievements they can accumulate, or how successful they appear to the outside world. But this kind of confidence is incredibly fragile because it depends entirely on factors outside your control. It disappears the moment you face criticism, failure, rejection, or comparison to someone who seems more successful than you are. Real confidence comes from a completely different source. It comes from your relationship with yourself, specifically from your ability to trust yourself to handle whatever challenges arise. It comes from knowing that regardless of what happens externally, you have the skills, resilience, and resourcefulness to respond effectively. It comes from having evidence that you can set goals and follow through on them, that you can face discomfort and push through it, that you can learn from failure and keep moving forward, and that you can stay true to your values even when it's difficult. This kind of confidence is built through what I call self-trust deposits. Every time you make a commitment to yourself and follow through on it, you make a deposit in your self-trust account. Every time you face a challenge and handle it effectively, you prove to yourself that you're capable. Every time you stay true to your values despite external pressure, you strengthen your internal foundation. Every time you take action despite fear or uncertainty, you expand your comfort zone and build evidence of your resilience. The opposite is also true. Every time you make a commitment to yourself and break it, you make a withdrawal from your self-trust account. Every time you avoid challenges or give up when things get difficult, you reinforce the belief that you can't handle adversity. Every time you compromise your values to please others or avoid conflict, you weaken your internal foundation. Every time you let fear stop you from taking action, you teach yourself that you're not capable of handling uncertainty or discomfort. Most people have been making withdrawals from their self-trust account for so long that they're operating in emotional bankruptcy. They don't believe they can rely on themselves to follow through on commitments, handle challenges, or stay true to their values. This is why they're constantly seeking external validation, approval, and reassurance. They're trying to get from others what they haven't learned to give themselves. Evidence that they're capable, valuable, and worthy of respect. Building unshakable confidence requires a systematic approach to making self-trust deposits. This starts with making small commitments to yourself and following through on them consistently. It doesn't matter what the commitments are. They could be as simple as exercising for 20 minutes every day, reading for 30 minutes every evening, or writing in a journal every morning. What matters is that you commit to something specific and then prove to yourself that your word to yourself means something. The key is to start small enough that you can maintain consistency even when motivation is low. Circumstances are challenging, or you don't feel like doing it. Most people set commitments that are too ambitious, fail to maintain them, and then use that failure as evidence that they can't trust themselves. This creates a negative cycle where each failure makes the next failure more likely because your confidence in your own reliability continues to erode. But when you start small and build consistency, you create a positive cycle. Each success makes the next success more likely because your confidence in your ability to follow through continues to grow. Over time, you can gradually increase the difficulty of your commitments as your self-trust account grows stronger. You move from small daily habits to bigger challenges to major goals, always building on the foundation of proven reliability to yourself. Unshakable confidence also requires learning to process failure and setbacks effectively. Confident people don't avoid failure. They fail more frequently than average people because they take more risks and attempt more challenging goals. The difference is in how they interpret failure. Instead of seeing failure as evidence of inadequacy, they see it as valuable feedback that helps them adjust their approach and improve their strategy. This reframing is crucial because it allows you to maintain confidence even in the face of temporary setbacks. You don't need to be perfect to be confident. You don't need to succeed at everything to trust yourself. You just need to know that you can learn from whatever happens and keep moving toward your goals. This kind of resilience is what allows truly confident people to attempt ambitious goals, recover from major setbacks, and maintain their sense of self-worth regardless of external circumstances. Another component of unshakable confidence is internal validation. Most people are constantly seeking approval, recognition, and reassurance from others because they haven't learned to validate themselves. They need external confirmation that they're doing well, making progress, or handling things appropriately. This makes them incredibly vulnerable to other people's opinions, moods, and judgments. But when you develop internal validation skills, you become much less dependent on external feedback for your sense of worth and confidence. You learn to recognize your own progress, celebrate your own improvements, and appreciate your own efforts, regardless of whether anyone else notices or acknowledges them. You develop the ability to feel proud of yourself based on your own standards rather than constantly measuring yourself against other people's expectations. Chapter 9. The compound effect of daily self-investment. Here's a concept that will completely change how you think about personal development. The compound effect is not just a financial principle, it's the most powerful force for personal transformation that exists. Just like small amounts of money, invested consistently over time, can grow into massive wealth through compound interest. Small amounts of daily investment in yourself compound over time into extraordinary levels of capability, confidence, and achievement. But most people completely underestimate this principle because they're obsessed with immediate results and dramatic transformations, instead of understanding that the most powerful changes happen gradually through consistent daily action. The reason most people fail to develop themselves is not because they don't want to improve or because they don't have access to information about how to improve. They fail because they expect change to be immediate and dramatic. And when they don't see fast results, they give up and conclude that personal development doesn't work. They try a new approach for a few days or weeks, don't see the transformation they were hoping for, and move on to the next strategy or give up entirely. This is like planting a seed and digging it up every few days to see if it's grown yet. But here's how the compound effect actually works in personal development. Small, seemingly insignificant actions taken consistently over time create massive transformations that appear sudden, but are actually the result of gradual accumulation. Reading 10 pages of a valuable book every day doesn't seem like much. But over a year, that's over 15 books, and an enormous expansion of knowledge and perspective. Exercising for 20 minutes every day doesn't seem like much. But over a year, that's more than 120 hours of physical conditioning and habit formation. Practicing a skill for 30 minutes every day doesn't seem like much. But over a year, that's more than 180 hours of deliberate practice and significant expertise development. The power of daily self-investment is that it's sustainable, cumulative, and creates momentum over time. Unlike dramatic attempts at change that require massive willpower and usually lead to burnout and reversal, small daily investments work with your psychology rather than against it. They're easy enough to maintain even when motivation is low, circumstances are challenging, or you're busy with other priorities. But they're substantial enough to create real progress when accumulated over time. Most people dramatically overestimate what they can accomplish in a week or a month, and dramatically underestimate what they can accomplish in a year or a decade through consistent daily action. They want to transform their lives overnight, so they attempt massive changes that are impossible to sustain. They try to go from never exercising to working out 2 hours every day, from never reading to reading 3 books per week, from never meditating to meditating for an hour every morning. These approaches almost always fail because they require such a dramatic shift from current habits that they create internal resistance and overwhelm. The compound effect approach works because it respects the way human psychology and habit formation actually operate. Your brain is designed to resist sudden, dramatic changes because they're interpreted as potential threats to your survival. But small, gradual changes can be integrated without triggering resistance. Your brain doesn't perceive a 20-minute daily walk as a threat, but it might resist a sudden attempt to run 5 miles every day. Your brain doesn't resist reading 1 chapter per day, but it might resist trying to read an entire book in a weekend. Daily self-investment also creates what psychologists call identity-based change. Instead of trying to force yourself to do things that contradict your current self-image, you gradually shift your identity by consistently acting in alignment with who you want to become. Each day that you read, you reinforce the identity of someone who values learning. Each day that you exercise, you reinforce the identity of someone who prioritizes health. Each day that you practice a skill, you reinforce the identity of someone who is committed to mastery. This identity shift is crucial because behavior that's inconsistent with your self-image requires constant willpower to maintain. But behavior that's consistent with your identity feels natural and automatic. When you see yourself as someone who reads daily, choosing to read doesn't require decision-making energy. When you see yourself as someone who exercises regularly, working out doesn't feel like a struggle against your nature. When you see yourself as someone who is constantly learning and growing, investing time in personal development feels obvious and inevitable. The compound effect also works because it creates multiple types of returns simultaneously. When you invest in reading daily, you're not just gaining knowledge, You're also improving your focus, expanding your vocabulary, enhancing your critical thinking skills, and developing the habit of consistent self-improvement. When you invest in daily exercise, you're not just improving your physical fitness, you're also boosting your energy, enhancing your mood, building discipline, and creating a foundation of daily structure that supports other positive habits. This multiplier effect means that the benefits of daily self-investment extend far beyond the specific area you're focusing on. The discipline you develop through maintaining daily habits transfers to other areas of your life. The confidence you build through consistent follow-through affects how you approach challenges and opportunities. The energy you create through physical fitness enhances your mental performance. The knowledge you gain through reading improves your decision-making in all areas of life. Chapter 10. The Armor Against Criticism and Social Pressure. If you're going to focus on yourself and pursue authentic growth, you need to understand something fundamental. Criticism and social pressure are inevitable, and your ability to handle them effectively will determine whether you can maintain your commitment to personal development or whether you'll retreat back to the safety of mediocrity and conformity. Most people abandon their growth because they can't handle the discomfort of being misunderstood, criticized, or socially pressured to return to their previous level. They start making positive changes, encounter resistance from others, and conclude that it's easier to stay small than to deal with the social consequences of growth. Here's what you need to understand about criticism and social pressure. They're not indicators that you're doing something wrong. They're indicators that you're doing something different. When you start prioritizing your development over other people's comfort, when you start setting boundaries instead of being endlessly available, when you start pursuing your authentic interests, instead of conforming to group expectations, you will inevitably trigger discomfort in people who are invested in keeping you at your previous level. This discomfort manifests as criticism disguised as concern. People will tell you that you're being selfish for focusing on yourself. They'll warn you that you're becoming arrogant or that success will change you in negative ways. They'll question your goals and point out all the ways you might fail. They'll remind you of your past failures as evidence that you shouldn't attempt anything ambitious. They'll tell you that you're unrealistic, impractical, or that you should be grateful for what you already have instead of wanting more. Most of this criticism is not really about you or your choices. It's about their own insecurities and fears. When someone tells you that focusing on yourself is selfish, what they're really saying is that your self-focus threatens their ability to access your time and energy for their own needs. When someone tells you that your goals are unrealistic, what they're often saying is that your ambition makes them feel uncomfortable about their own lack of ambition. When someone warns you about the dangers of success, they're usually expressing their own fear of failure or change. Understanding the psychology behind criticism makes it much easier to process without taking it personally or letting it derail your progress. People criticize what threatens them or what they don't understand. If your growth threatens someone's sense of security, superiority, or access to your resources, they will find ways to discourage it. If your choices highlight their own lack of direction or commitment, they will find reasons to invalidate those choices. This is human nature, not personal attack, and recognizing it allows you to respond strategically rather than emotionally. The armor against criticism is built from several components. First, you need absolute clarity about your values, goals, and reasons for pursuing growth. When you're clear about why you're making the choices you're making, external criticism becomes much less relevant because you have an internal standard for evaluation. You know whether your actions align with your values and support your goals, regardless of what anyone else thinks about them. Second, you need to distinguish between constructive feedback and destructive criticism. Constructive feedback comes from people who support your growth and want to help you succeed more effectively. It's specific, actionable, and offered with genuine care for your well-being. Destructive criticism comes from people who want to discourage your growth or make themselves feel better by diminishing your efforts. It's usually vague, personal, and offered with underlying hostility or insecurity. Learning to identify the difference allows you to be open to valuable input while protecting yourself from toxic influence. You can listen carefully to constructive feedback from people who have your best interests at heart, while dismissing destructive criticism from people who are threatened by your development. This discernment is crucial because completely shutting out all feedback makes you isolated and potentially blind to important areas for improvement, while accepting all criticism makes you vulnerable to being derailed by other people's insecurities. Third, you need to develop what psychologists call internal locus of control. This means that your sense of worth, direction, and validation comes primarily from internal standards rather than external approval. People with internal locus of control evaluate their decisions based on whether those decisions align with their values and support their goals. People with external locus of control evaluate their decisions based on how others react to them. When you have strong internal locus of control, criticism loses much of its power because you're not dependent on other people's approval for your sense of worth or direction. You can consider feedback objectively without becoming emotionally destabilized by it. You can maintain your commitment to growth even when others don't understand or support your choices. Fourth, you need to surround yourself with people who understand and support your commitment to growth. This doesn't mean only associating with people who never challenge you or never offer feedback. It means building relationships with people who share your values around personal development and who want to see you succeed. These relationships provide a buffer against external criticism because they offer alternative perspectives and emotional support when you encounter resistance from others. The ultimate armor against criticism is your own results. When you consistently follow through on your commitments to yourself, when you steadily develop your skills and capabilities, when you create value and achieve meaningful goals, the evidence of your progress becomes undeniable. Critics may continue to find fault, but their opinions carry less weight when contradicted by objective reality. This is why maintaining your focus and consistency is so important, even when facing social pressure. Every day that you prioritize your development over external approval, you strengthen your internal foundation and build evidence of your commitment to growth. Over time, this creates unshakable confidence in your ability to determine your own direction, regardless of what others think about it. Chapter 11. The execution mastery that separates dreamers from achievers. Here's the brutal truth about why most people never achieve their potential. They confuse thinking about goals with working toward goals. They mistake planning for progress. And they believe that understanding something intellectually is the same as implementing it practically. They spend endless hours consuming motivational content, reading about success strategies, and talking about what they're going to do someday. But they never actually develop the execution mastery required to turn ideas into reality. This is the gap that separates people who transform their lives from people who just think about transforming their lives. Execution mastery is not about working harder or longer hours. Most people who struggle with execution are actually working quite hard. They're just working on the wrong things at the wrong times, in the wrong ways. True execution mastery is about developing the mental discipline to consistently take the specific actions that directly contribute to your most important goals. Regardless of how you feel, what distractions are available, or what immediate gratification you could pursue instead. The first component of execution mastery is what I call priority ruthlessness. Most people fail to execute effectively because they try to pursue too many goals simultaneously. They don't distinguish between what's important and what's urgent, and they allow low-priority activities to consume the time and energy they should be investing in high-impact actions. Priority ruthlessness means getting absolutely clear about the 3 to 5 most important outcomes you want to achieve, and then organizing your entire schedule around making progress on those outcomes every single day. This requires saying no to everything else, no matter how interesting, urgent, or socially expected it might be. It means declining invitations that don't align with your priorities, avoiding projects that don't contribute to your core goals, and eliminating activities that feel productive but don't actually move you closer to what you're trying to achieve. Most people are terrified of this level of focus because they're afraid they'll miss out on opportunities or disappoint people. But the truth is that trying to do everything means doing nothing exceptionally well. The second component is implementation systems. Most people approach execution randomly and reactively. They wait for motivation to strike. They work on whatever feels most appealing in the moment, and they hope that their good intentions will somehow translate into consistent action. This approach virtually guarantees inconsistent results because it depends entirely on feelings and circumstances that are constantly changing. Execution masters create systems that guarantee consistent action regardless of external circumstances or internal motivation levels. These systems include specific daily routines that automatically move them toward their goals, environmental design that makes productive behavior easier and unproductive behavior harder, and accountability structures that create external pressure to follow through on commitments. They don't rely on willpower or motivation because they understand that these resources are limited and unreliable. For example, if your goal is to write a book, an execution master doesn't wait for inspiration or try to write when they feel creative. They establish a specific time each day when they write. They create a dedicated space for writing that's free from distractions. They set a specific word count target for each session, and they track their progress visually so they can see their momentum building over time. They make writing so automatic and systematic that it happens whether they feel like it or not. The third component is resistance management. Every meaningful goal involves activities that are uncomfortable, challenging, or boring. Your brain will constantly generate resistance to these activities by offering more immediately gratifying alternatives, creating elaborate justifications for procrastination, or generating fears about potential failure or judgment. Most people are slaves to this resistance, which is why they never develop the consistency required for significant achievement. Execution masters understand that resistance is inevitable and plan for it strategically. They expect their brain to offer distractions and have predetermined responses ready. They break challenging tasks into smaller components that feel less overwhelming. They use time-based constraints to limit how long they have to endure discomfort. They remind themselves of their deeper motivations when immediate satisfaction feels more appealing than long-term progress. The fourth component is feedback optimization. Most people either avoid feedback entirely because they're afraid of criticism, or they seek feedback but don't actually use it to improve their approach. Execution masters actively seek specific, actionable feedback about their progress and methods, and they adjust their approach based on what they learn. They measure their results consistently, they analyze what's working and what isn't, and they continuously refine their systems to become more effective over time. This creates a continuous improvement cycle where execution becomes more efficient and effective through iteration. They don't just work hard. They work smart by constantly learning how to get better results with less effort and fewer resources. They treat every project as an opportunity to develop their execution skills, not just as a means to achieve a specific outcome. The fifth component is momentum maintenance. Most people work in starts and stops. They make progress for a few days or weeks, then take breaks that turn into extended periods of inactivity, then have to start over from scratch. This pattern makes everything harder because you're constantly overcoming initial resistance instead of building on existing momentum. Execution masters understand that momentum is one of the most valuable assets you can create, and they protect it religiously. They maintain some level of daily action on their most important goals, even when circumstances are challenging or motivation is low. They understand that doing something small is infinitely better than doing nothing, because maintaining momentum preserves all the progress you've made and makes it easier to return to full intensity when conditions improve. Chapter 12. The relationship revolution that changes everything. Here's something most people never realize about relationships. When you start focusing on yourself and developing genuine confidence, self-respect, and clear boundaries, the quality of every relationship in your life either dramatically improves or the relationship naturally ends. This is not a bug. It's a feature. The relationships that improve are those with people who respect growth, appreciate authenticity, and are capable of healthy dynamics. The relationships that end are those that were based on your willingness to be small, accommodating, or available for other people's dysfunction. Most people are terrified of this relationship revolution because they're afraid of being alone. They're attached to familiar dynamics, even when those dynamics are unhealthy, and they've never experienced what it's like to have relationships based on mutual respect and genuine compatibility rather than neediness, obligation, or fear. But here's what you need to understand. Low-quality relationships are worse than no relationships. Staying connected to people who drain your energy, disrespect your boundaries, or require you to suppress your authentic self is not love or loyalty. It's self-abandonment. When you focus on developing yourself, you naturally become less available for relationships that require you to be less than who you're becoming. You stop tolerating disrespect because you've learned to respect yourself. You stop accepting crumbs of affection because you've developed a strong sense of your own worth. You stop trying to fix or save other people because you're focused on your own growth and development. You stop being the therapist, the rescuer, or the constant giver in relationships where there's no reciprocity or mutual investment. This shift often triggers intense reactions from people who are benefiting from your previous patterns. The friend who was used to you always being available for their emotional crises will accuse you of being selfish when you're no longer on call. The romantic partner who was comfortable with an unequal dynamic will feel threatened when you start expecting mutual respect and effort. The family member who was used to controlling or manipulating you will escalate their behavior when your boundaries become firm and consistent. These reactions are not evidence that you're doing something wrong. They're evidence that you were previously in unhealthy dynamics and that your growth is disrupting patterns that weren't serving you. The people who truly care about you will respect your boundaries and support your development, even if they need time to adjust to the changes. The people who don't will reveal themselves through their resistance to your growth, and you'll have valuable information about whether these relationships are worth maintaining. The relationship revolution also involves attracting entirely new types of people into your life. When you have genuine self-respect, clear boundaries, and authentic confidence, you naturally attract others who share these qualities. You start connecting with people who are also committed to growth, who have their own goals and interests, who can contribute to your life rather than just taking from it, and who appreciate your authenticity rather than trying to change you. These new relationships feel completely different from what you may have experienced before. There's less drama because both people are emotionally mature. There's more mutual support because both people are invested in each other's success. There's more genuine intimacy because both people are comfortable being themselves rather than performing to please each other. There's more stability because the relationship is based on compatible values and mutual respect rather than neediness or fear. But attracting high-quality relationships requires you to become a high-quality person yourself. You can't have standards for others that you don't meet yourself. You can't expect respect from others if you don't demonstrate self-respect. You can't attract emotionally healthy people if you're not doing your own emotional work. You can't expect others to have clear boundaries if you don't have clear boundaries yourself. This is why focusing on yourself is not selfish when it comes to relationships. It's essential. The better you become, the better the people you'll attract, and the better your relationships will be. The more you develop your own interests, skills, and goals, the more interesting and valuable you become as a partner, friend, or colleague. The more you learn to validate yourself internally, the less you'll need constant reassurance from others, which makes you much more attractive and less exhausting to be around. The relationship revolution also involves changing how you communicate and interact with others. When you have genuine confidence and self-respect, you can be more direct and honest in your communication because you're not afraid of conflict or rejection. You can express your needs clearly because you believe you deserve to have your needs met. You can disagree with others without feeling threatened because your sense of worth doesn't depend on universal approval. This directness and authenticity actually improves relationships because it eliminates the guessing games, passive-aggressive behavior, and resentment that come from poor communication. People know where they stand with you, which creates trust and respect, even when there's disagreement. Your relationships become based on reality rather than pretense, which makes them much more satisfying and sustainable. The revolution also involves learning to be alone comfortably. Most people stay in unsatisfying relationships because they're afraid of loneliness. But when you've developed a rich internal life and genuine self-respect, being alone becomes enjoyable rather than frightening. You don't need other people to entertain you, validate you, or make you feel worthwhile. This comfort with solitude paradoxically makes you much more attractive to others because neediness is repelling while self-sufficiency is magnetic. When you're genuinely comfortable being alone, you make relationship choices from a position of preference rather than desperation. You choose to be with people because you enjoy their company and value what they bring to your life. not because you're afraid of being by yourself. This leads to much healthier dynamics because the relationship is based on mutual choice rather than mutual dependency. Chapter 13. The mental fortress that makes you unbreakable. The difference between people who achieve extraordinary things and people who collapse under pressure is not talent, resources, or circumstances. It's mental resilience. It's the ability to maintain focus, confidence, and forward momentum regardless of setbacks, criticism, failures, or external chaos. Most people have glass minds that shatter at the first sign of real difficulty, but legends build mental fortresses that can withstand any storm and emerge stronger from every challenge. Building a mental fortress starts with understanding that your mind is under constant attack from forces designed to weaken your resolve and limit your potential. Every day you're bombarded with negative news that makes the world seem dangerous and hopeless. You're exposed to social media that encourages comparison and breeds insecurity. You encounter people who project their own limitations and fears onto your goals and dreams. You face setbacks and failures that can either strengthen your resolve or convince you to quit. Most people have no defense against these attacks because they've never consciously developed their mental resilience. They allow external circumstances to dictate their internal state. They let other people's opinions shape their self-perception. They interpret temporary setbacks as permanent failures. They absorb negativity from their environment and wonder why they feel discouraged and defeated. But a mental fortress protects you from all of these influences by creating an unshakable internal foundation that remains stable regardless of external chaos. This foundation is built on several key components that work together to create psychological invincibility. The first component is perspective mastery. Most people get trapped in temporary circumstances and lose sight of the bigger picture. They allow immediate challenges to consume their entire mental bandwidth and forget that every setback is temporary and every failure is an opportunity for learning and growth. Perspective mastery means developing the ability to zoom out from current difficulties and remember your long-term vision, values, and trajectory. This doesn't mean ignoring problems or pretending challenges don't exist. It means putting current difficulties in context and remembering that your life is not defined by any single event, setback, or period of struggle. Every successful person has faced failures, rejections, and periods of doubt. What separates them from people who quit is their ability to maintain perspective during difficult times and continue moving forward despite temporary obstacles. The second component is emotional regulation mastery. Most people are slaves to their emotions, allowing feelings to dictate their actions and decisions. When they feel discouraged, they stop taking productive action. When they feel anxious, they avoid challenges and opportunities. When they feel angry, they make decisions they later regret. When they feel overwhelmed, they abandon their goals and retreat to what feels safe. Emotional regulation mastery means learning to acknowledge your emotions without being controlled by them. It means developing the ability to take productive action even when you don't feel motivated, confident, or optimistic. It means understanding that feelings are temporary experiences that provide information but shouldn't dictate behavior. It means building the capacity to feel difficult emotions fully without letting them derail your commitment to your goals and values. The third component is meaning-making mastery. Humans are meaning-making creatures, and the meaning you assign to events in your life determines how those events affect your mental state and future behavior. Most people unconsciously assign disempowering meanings to challenges and setbacks. They interpret failure as evidence of inadequacy, criticism as confirmation of unworthiness, and obstacles as signs that they should quit or lower their standards. Meaning-making mastery involves consciously choosing empowering interpretations of difficult experiences. Instead of seeing failure as evidence of inadequacy, you see it as valuable feedback that helps you improve your approach. Instead of seeing criticism as confirmation of unworthiness, you see it as information that may or may not be useful for your development. Instead of seeing obstacles as signs to quit, you see them as opportunities to develop resilience and problem-solving skills. The fourth component is narrative control. Most people are unconscious of the story they're telling themselves about their life, their potential, and their circumstances. They operate from disempowering narratives that limit their possibilities and justify mediocrity. They see themselves as victims of circumstances rather than creators of their reality. They focus on what's wrong, what's missing, and what's impossible rather than what's working, what's available, and what's achievable. Narrative control means becoming conscious of the story you're telling yourself and deliberately choosing a narrative that empowers action and growth. Instead of focusing on your limitations, you focus on your potential. Instead of dwelling on past failures, you focus on future possibilities. Instead of seeing yourself as a victim of circumstances, you see yourself as the author of your experience with the power to influence outcomes through your choices and actions. The fifth component is stress inoculation. Just like physical immune systems become stronger through exposure to manageable challenges, mental resilience grows stronger through deliberate exposure to controllable stressors. Most people avoid discomfort and challenge, which means they never develop the psychological strength to handle significant difficulties when they inevitably arise. Stress inoculation involves systematically exposing yourself to increasingly challenging situations so you can build confidence in your ability to handle adversity. This might mean taking on projects that stretch your abilities, having difficult conversations you've been avoiding, or pursuing goals that require you to operate outside your comfort zone. Each time you successfully navigate a challenging situation, you build evidence that you can handle difficulty, which makes you more resilient in future situations. The mental fortress also requires what Navy SEALs call compartmentalization. This is the ability to separate your current emotional state from your necessary actions. Even if you're feeling discouraged, anxious, or overwhelmed, you can still take the actions required to move toward your goals. Even if circumstances are challenging or chaotic, you can still focus on what's within your control and make productive decisions. Chapter 14. The reality creation that puts you in complete control. Here's a concept that will fundamentally change how you approach life. You are not a passive victim of circumstances. You are an active creator of your reality. Most people live as if life happens to them, as if their circumstances are determined by forces outside their control, as if their only option is to react to whatever situations arise. But the most successful and fulfilled people understand that while you can't control everything that happens to you, you have tremendous power to influence your environment, your opportunities, your relationships, and your outcomes through conscious choice and strategic action. Reality creation starts with understanding that your external world is largely a reflection of your internal world. Your circumstances mirror your beliefs, your standards, your habits, your decisions, and the energy you consistently put out into the world. If your life feels chaotic and out of control, it's usually because your internal world lacks clarity, discipline, and intentional structure. If your relationships are consistently dysfunctional, it's usually because you haven't developed the self-awareness and emotional skills necessary for healthy dynamics. Most people resist this concept because it requires taking full responsibility for their life experience. And responsibility can feel overwhelming when you're used to blaming external circumstances for your problems. It's easier to believe that your boss is the reason you're unhappy at work than to acknowledge that you chose this job and have the power to choose differently. It's easier to believe that you're unlucky in relationships than to examine the patterns you've been creating and the standards you've been accepting. But this resistance keeps you trapped in victimhood and prevents you from accessing your power to create change. When you blame external circumstances for your problems, you're essentially saying that you're powerless to improve your situation. When you take responsibility for your role in creating your current reality, you reclaim your power to create a different reality through different choices and actions. Reality creation involves several key principles that work together to give you increasing control over your life experience. The first principle is environmental design. Your environment shapes your behavior, thoughts, and emotions much more than most people realize. If your physical space is cluttered and chaotic, it's much harder to maintain mental clarity and focus. If you're constantly surrounded by negative people, it's much harder to maintain a positive outlook and ambitious goals. Environmental design means consciously creating conditions that support the person you want to become and the life you want to live. This includes designing your physical space to encourage productive behaviors and discourage unproductive ones. It includes choosing social environments that inspire growth rather than enable mediocrity. It includes selecting information sources that expand your thinking rather than reinforce limitation. It includes creating daily routines and systems that automatically move you toward your goals. For example, if you want to become someone who reads regularly, you might place books in visible locations throughout your home. Create a comfortable reading space free from distractions, and establish a specific time each day when reading happens automatically. If you want to become someone who exercises consistently, you might lay out workout clothes the night before, choose a gym that's convenient to your daily routine, and schedule exercise at a time when you have the most energy. The second principle is relationship curation. Your relationships have enormous influence on your beliefs, standards, energy level, and possibilities. People who are consistently negative will drag down your energy and motivation. People who have low standards will pressure you to lower your standards. People who don't believe in growth and improvement will discourage your efforts to develop yourself. Relationship curation means consciously choosing who gets access to your time, energy, and attention based on whether they support or hinder your development. This doesn't mean being arrogant or judgmental toward others. It means being strategic about who you invest in and who you allow to influence your thinking and emotions. It means seeking out relationships with people who inspire you, challenge you in positive ways, and support your commitment to growth. The third principle is opportunity creation. Most people wait for opportunities to appear and then wonder why they feel stuck and limited. But opportunities are rarely just given to you. They're usually created through preparation, positioning, skill development, network building, and strategic action. The people who seem to have all the luck are usually those who have prepared themselves to recognize and capitalize on possibilities that others miss. Opportunity creation means proactively developing skills that will be valuable in the future. Building relationships with people who can open doors, positioning yourself in environments where interesting possibilities exist, and consistently taking actions that expand your options rather than limiting them. It means being ready when opportunities arise, rather than scrambling to prepare after they've already passed. The fourth principle is feedback optimization. Most people either avoid feedback entirely or receive feedback, but don't systematically use it to improve their approach. But feedback is essential information that helps you understand what's working and what needs adjustment in your reality creation process. This means actively seeking feedback about your performance, your approach, and your results from people who have expertise in areas where you want to improve. It means measuring your progress consistently so you can identify patterns and trends. It means being willing to acknowledge when something isn't working and adjusting your strategy rather than continuing ineffective approaches out of stubbornness or ego. The fifth principle is compound leverage. Small, consistent actions compound over time into massive results. But most people underestimate this power because they want immediate gratification rather than delayed rewards. Reality creation involves identifying high-leverage activities that create disproportionate returns and then systematically investing in those activities over extended periods. For example, developing strong communication skills creates leverage in every area of life because almost every goal requires the ability to influence, persuade, or collaborate with others. Building a strong professional network creates leverage because relationships often determine which opportunities become available. Developing emotional intelligence creates leverage because self-awareness and interpersonal skills affect every relationship and decision. Reality creation is not about positive thinking or wishful visualization. It's about understanding the factors that influence outcomes and then systematically organizing those factors to increase the probability of achieving your desired results. It's about taking responsibility for your role in creating your current circumstances and then using that same power to create better circumstances through more conscious choices and more strategic actions. Chapter 15. The unstoppable transformation that makes you legendary. You've reached the point where everything changes, not because you've absorbed more information or learned new techniques, but because you finally understand the fundamental truth that will determine the quality of your entire life. You are not who you were yesterday, and who you become tomorrow is entirely within your control. Most people never grasp this concept because they're trapped in the illusion that personality, capabilities, and circumstances are fixed. They believe they are who they are, and that's the end of the story. But you now understand that identity is fluid, that capabilities can be developed, and that circumstances can be influenced through conscious choice and persistent action. The unstoppable transformation begins when you make a decision that most people never make. The decision to become completely responsible for your own development, happiness, and success. Not partially responsible. Not responsible when it's convenient. Completely responsible. Which means acknowledging that every aspect of your current life is the result of your past choices, actions, and responses to circumstances. This level of responsibility is terrifying to most people because it eliminates all excuses and external sources of blame, but it's also incredibly liberating because it means you have the power to create different results through different choices. This transformation is unstoppable because it's based on principles that compound over time rather than strategies that depend on external circumstances. When you focus consistently on developing yourself, when you build unshakable confidence through daily self-trust deposits, when you create boundaries that protect your energy and potential, when you surround yourself with influences that support your growth, the momentum builds exponentially. Each improvement creates the foundation for the next improvement. Each success increases your confidence to attempt bigger challenges. Each challenge you overcome expands your sense of what's possible. The transformation is also unstoppable because it changes you at the identity level rather than just at the behavioral level. You're not just trying to act differently while remaining the same person underneath. You're actually becoming a different person. Someone who naturally thinks, feels, and acts in alignment with your highest potential. This identity shift makes positive behaviors feel natural and automatic, rather than forced and temporary. But here's what you must understand about this transformation. It will be tested. The moment you commit to becoming the most powerful version of yourself, everything in your environment will conspire to pull you back to your previous level. People who are comfortable with the old you will resist the new you. Circumstances will arise that challenge your resolve. Your own psychology will generate fear, doubt, and resistance to change. These tests are not punishments or signs that you're on the wrong path. They're graduation exams that prove you've actually internalized the principles we've discussed, rather than just intellectually understanding them. Every time you maintain your boundaries despite social pressure, every time you continue working toward your goals despite setbacks, every time you choose long-term growth over short-term comfort, you prove to yourself and the world that your transformation is real and permanent. The legendary level is reached when external circumstances no longer dictate your internal state or your commitment to growth. You become someone who can maintain focus during chaos, confidence during criticism, and momentum during setbacks. You become someone who creates value regardless of the environment, who inspires others through your example rather than your words, and who approaches challenges with excitement rather than fear, because you know that every challenge is an opportunity for further development. This level of psychological development is what separates true leaders from followers, creators from consumers, and legends from everyone else. It's not about achieving specific external goals, though those will naturally follow. It's about becoming the kind of person who can achieve any goal they set because they've developed the internal resources necessary for sustained excellence in any area they choose to focus on. But becoming legendary requires what I call obsessive consistency. Most people are consistent when it's convenient, motivated when they feel inspired, and disciplined when circumstances are favorable. Legendary people are consistent, especially when it's inconvenient, motivated, especially when they don't feel inspired, and disciplined, especially when circumstances are challenging. They understand that character is revealed not by how you behave when everything is going well, but by how you behave when everything is going wrong. This obsessive consistency extends to every aspect of your development. You're not just committed to growing when you have time. You're committed to growing every single day, even if it's just for 10 minutes. You're not just focused on your goals when you're motivated. You're focused on your goals, especially when motivation is absent, because you understand that discipline is more reliable than motivation. You're not just working on yourself when it's easy. You're working on yourself, especially when it's difficult, because you know that's when the most important growth happens. The unstoppable transformation also requires what I call exponential thinking. Most people think linearly about their development. They expect progress to be steady and predictable, improvement to be gradual and incremental, and results to be proportional to effort. But exponential thinking recognizes that growth accelerates over time when you're consistent with the fundamentals. Small daily investments compound into massive capabilities. Consistent daily actions create momentum that makes bigger actions possible. Gradual identity shifts eventually reach a tipping point where transformation feels effortless and automatic. This exponential effect means that the person you become through this process will be almost unrecognizable compared to who you are today. Your confidence, capabilities, relationships, opportunities, and impact will expand in ways that currently seem impossible because you can't imagine what becomes possible when you fully commit to your own development over an extended period. The final component of unstoppable transformation is legacy consciousness. This means recognizing that your commitment to developing yourself is not just about your own fulfillment and success. It's about modeling what's possible for everyone who observes your journey. Every person who sees you transform from someone who was stuck, uncertain, or mediocre into someone who is confident, capable, and excellent receives proof that such transformation is possible for them too. Your growth becomes a gift to everyone in your orbit because it expands their sense of what's achievable. Your success becomes an inspiration that motivates others to pursue their own development. Your example becomes evidence that focusing on yourself is not selfish but generous, because the better you become, the more value you can create for everyone around you. This is your moment. Right now, you have everything you need to begin the transformation that will change your life and impact everyone who knows you. You have the knowledge, the frameworks, the strategies, and most importantly, the understanding that this journey is not just possible, but inevitable when you commit fully to focusing on yourself with intention, consistency, and unshakable determination. The question is not whether you can transform your life. The question is whether you will choose to do so. The power has always been yours. Now you know how to use it.